After Kamala Harris's masterful performance yesterday on the Fox propaganda outlet in her interview with Bret Baier, it was only a matter of time before Donald Trump took his tiny little thumbs to Truth Social to throw a tantrum. And that is exactly what he did this morning, angrily typing away in response to Kamala Harris's incredible performance. Because not only did she show an audience that sorely lacks the truth, the incredible candidate and leader that she is, but she also made that stark contrast that we continue to see in this campaign between Donald Trump, who is terrified to sit down for any interview in which a Fox host isn't holding his hand, and Kamala Harris, who yesterday went into the lion's den, who took a combative interview, who took difficult questions, and really they were mostly gotcha questions, but came out on top. And so Donald Trump is absolutely furious, melting down on Truth Social, and we are going to get into all of that. Before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and want to join the community that we're building here, to hit that subscribe button. We just passed 400,000 subscribers. This channel is growing so fast, and it's because of y'all. I really appreciate that. Now, before we get into what Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, I think we have to take a look at one specific clip of the interview that I think gives good context on why he's so upset.
Hacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches, not to mention how Donald Trump has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers, has diminished the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
Really just sad to see Bret Baier, someone who people were saying yesterday was a legitimate journalist, just doing his job as a Fox propagandist, trying to talk over Kamala Harris, trying to interrupt her, really just trying to do the job that Donald Trump wants him to, because this wasn't an interview. This was a series of gotcha questions and a series of Bret Baier trying to interrupt and speak over Kamala Harris, but she wouldn't let him. He failed at that. But another aspect in which he failed in this interview to be an actual journalist is a clip of him trying to sane wash Donald Trump's comments about the enemy from within. And it was a notable part of this interview because Kamala Harris called him out for it. But Kamala Harris's campaign also followed up with a video of the actual response from Donald Trump that I think we need to check out before we get into his Truth Social post.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
Kamala Harris has said you sounded unhinged, and unchecked power is in our future. What do you say about that?
I thought it was a nice presentation. I wasn't unhinged. You know what they are? They're a party of sound bites. Somebody asked me, can they be brought together? You know, I never thought, really, I wasn't thinking like they could, because they're very, very different. And it is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. I use a guy like Adam Schiff because they made up the Russia hoax. It took 2 years to solve the problem. Absolutely nothing was done wrong, et cetera, et cetera. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled.
This is what Republicans try to do. This is what the Trump stooges try to do. They try to take whatever Donald Trump says and put it within some context in which he doesn't mean it, and try to reframe or sane wash whatever he said to make it some sort of policy argument when that's never the case. And what's so funny about this is that whenever Donald Trump says something and then his Trump stooges try to fix it on the fly for him, he always then follows up the next day and said, no, I did mean to say that horribly offensive, horribly disturbing, horribly disgraceful thing. The Republicans who are defending me are wrong. I am, in fact, a crazy person, and that is exactly what we saw with Donald Trump's enemy from within comment that should really terrify us all. And what else should terrify us is Donald Trump's constant meltdowns on Truth Social, and especially this one. It was pretty bizarre. Let's take a look at it. Trump took to Truth Social writing, "Great job by Bret Baier in his interview with Lion Kamala Harris. She has a massive and irredeemable case of Trump derangement syndrome. So bad, in fact, that she is barely able to talk about any subject other than the man who had the best economy ever, the strongest border in history, and who got the unanimous endorsement of the U.S. Border Patrol, me. Their endorsement has a tremendous honor. They said that Comrade Kamala did a terrible job, the worst in memory, and can't be allowed to do it again. She is also the worst vice president in history, but hopefully will be gone soon. Again, congratulations to Bret Baier on a tough but fair interview, one that clearly showed how totally incompetent Kamala is. For the good of our nation, her inferior cognitive ability must be tested at once. So a clearly unhinged Donald Trump there, now calling for Kamala Harris to take a cognitive test when it is only Donald Trump's former staffers, when it is only hundreds of doctors and medical professionals, when it is only anyone with eyes and ears who thinks that he should be taking the cognitive test. And it's also funny that he's demanding that of her when Donald Trump won't appear on CNBC, he won't appear on 60 Minutes, he won't even do most Fox interviews unless the host is holding his hand and guiding him through every question. This is the person who is deranged. This is the person whose mental competency we need checked, even though we really know what the answer will be. And that was called out after this interview with Kamala Harris because she did so well by Pete Buttigieg in a great takedown of Trump. And I want to take a look.
What I will say is that, one principle I try to remember that I thought she demonstrated is making sure not to allow them to kind of change the subject or the framing of the question at hand, right? The whole topic there was the fact that a candidate for president and a former U.S. president described the American people, the ones he disagreed with, as the enemy. And it's really important not to allow some sidestepping of that. So, she did that. She also made sure to continue to get her point across even when she was being repeatedly interrupted. As somebody who has a lot of batting practice myself on that network, really proud of how she represented her views, her values, and this ticket in front of a conservative audience. Something I might add, by the way, that is a show of strength. That is the exact opposite of the weakness that Donald Trump has demonstrated by pulling out of going even on CNBC, which is hardly a liberal bastion, or 60 Minutes, where it's customary for both candidates to go on. He's not prepared to go in front of a skeptical, let alone unfriendly audience. She demonstrated the opposite. And remember, this is in keeping with her continued outreach to conservatives. Look at the difference between her making clear that she would include Republicans in her cabinet, campaigning with so many Republicans, principal Republicans, who are for her, versus him referring to Democrats as the enemy.
Yeah, and Pete is so spot on. It is Donald Trump who does not want to be doing interviews. It is Donald Trump who is running away from his record, running away from his agenda. He can talk about the greatest economy in history, but we were all there for the economic collapse under Donald Trump because of his mismanagement of COVID. We were there for Donald Trump's failure of leadership in moments of crisis. We were there for January 6th. We remember the Trump presidency. He cannot attempt to gaslight us about it, and he cannot attempt to gaslight us about this interview in which Kamala Harris did a great job after getting gotcha questions from Bret Baier. And we can tell that she did such a great job by the meltdown of a reaction from MAGA, especially from Don Jr., who tried to defend his dad in a Fox interview. But if you stick around to the end of what he said, actually ended up screwing him with just a dumb thing to say. Let's take a look.
All over the world, and they would love to have 4 more years of this unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, you mentioned McDonald's too, Don. I know your dad's going to be there Sunday working the fry machine. Did your dad watch the Fox interview with Kamala? What do you think?
Listen, I think my father knows the McDonald's menu much better than Kamala Harris ever did, and yet she can't tell us which. I wish Brett would have asked which McDonald's she worked at, because she'll just tell you whatever you want to hear to seem relatable and likable. But you saw in the interview,
all right,
she unhinged. There's nothing calm about it. This is someone who has to make trillion-dollar decisions. This is someone who has to pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning when life and death of Americans abroad could be on the line. This is not someone who has the personality or the demeanor to do that.
We are 19 days out from this election, and the argument that Don Jr. is making on behalf of his dad is that no one knows McDonald's like him. He knows McDonald's the most, not economic policy, right? Not how to secure our border, not how to work across the aisle. No, Donald Trump knows McDonald's. That's his expertise. He knows it so well. They've just lost the plot. They're completely deranged, and they're clearly melting down because they know how much success Kamala Harris is having and will continue to have through the end of this campaign. And for a little bit of contrast of her interview versus Donald Trump yesterday, let's check out the crowd reactions in a clip put together by Kamala Harris HQ from Donald Trump's Univision town hall yesterday.
They thought the election was a rigged election, and that's why they came. Ashley Babbitt was killed. Nobody was killed. There were no guns down there. But that was a day of love from the standpoint of the millions. It's like hundreds of thousands. It could have been the way I used the water, the sand, the mixing of the sand and the water. I mean, many different, but I've had many awards over the years for environmental, the way I've built, because you know about.
Those faces say it all. This is a deranged individual who has no place in the Oval Office, who never did, certainly doesn't now. And we have to make sure he does not get back, because we're not going back. And we're going to keep talking about that every single day on the show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.